Hello everyone, you already know who I am. This year, to share all the summer reading books with everyone, since I'll be on vacation for one of the public service staff meetings, decided to make a little video to share them with you all. So that's what we're going to do right now. The first book I'm going to show you just won the National Book Award, so there's been a lot of buzz around it already. It's the true story of Raja the Gullible and his mother. A really long title. It sounds like a Panic at the Disco song. It's by Rabi Alameddine, and it's about an older man and his even older mother who've lived together for years in Lebanon. And suddenly he gets an offer to go do a residency in America, and he has to decide if he wants to leave his mother and go take on that residency and go across the ocean. So it's gonna pull at your heartstrings, but there's also a lot of like mother-son comedy at play here. And it's one that I think you could recommend to folks who like to read those buzzy kind of book clubby books and the award winners as well. So that's one of the fiction options, the true story of Raja the Gullible. This next one, I know I'm not the only staff person excited about. It is Fearless Poetry in Perilous Times by Tracy K. Smith. She was a poet laureate of the US, she's won the Pulitzer Prize, and she's also had the distinct honor of being interviewed by Jen and Kelsey for the first 50 pages. And throughout the last year, I've encountered a lot of patrons who are really perplexed about poetry, but still interested in it. They really want to like get it. And this book makes poetry so approachable just to the average person. Like if you don't want to take it seriously like you would in an English class, you just want to read it and feel it, this book is totally for you. The idea I have connected to Plant a Seed with it is planting that seed of appreciation and enjoyment for poetry, something that a lot of people might not even know they like. So that is Fearless, a nonfiction selection. This next one is technically nonfiction, but it's an anthology, so it includes some of her fiction pieces as well. It is Putting Myself Together, writing from 1974 onwards by Jamaica Kincaid. Jamaica Kincaid is a pretty well-known author, and she has some really loyal fans. She has a really distinct voice. If you know people who like quirky characters, quirky storytellers, somebody who's into somebody maybe like David Sedaris even, might enjoy this book a lot. She has some pop music essays in here about criticism of like the Supreme. She's writing about Diana Ross, but then she also spends a lot of time writing about her garden and gardening. She's very into gardening. So if you know people who are into plants and gardening, like people who go to the seed swap, might really like this one. I think our patrons will enjoy the way Jamaica Kincaid writes, and it's another nonfiction selection. This one is the classic on the list. So you know every year I want to have a classic on there. Last year we did the Stepford Wives, which ended up being really popular with our patrons and still kind of is. And so I kind of took that as feedback, and I thought, let's find another like quirky kind of cult classic. And so we're doing Harry Harrison's Make Room, Make Room. And it's the classic novel of an overpopulated future. So it's a sci-fi thriller. It's really it's a quick read, it's really engaging, and it follows these characters in a really overcrowded New York City in the year of the future, 1999, which is kind of fun. And it's also the basis for the movie Soylent Green, which starred Charlton Heston, and that has a pretty famous twist to it, the movie does, that definitely ties into Plant a Seed read, but kind of in a twisted and sick way, which I think is kind of fun to play around with. So that is the classic this year. It's a fiction book, it's a novel, science fiction, Make Room by Harry Harrison. This one, in addition to including a classic on the list, I also like to look for at least one book that's from a smaller Midwestern book publisher that kind of speaks to more like of a regional interest. And so this one was published by Bison Books, which is out of Lincoln, Nebraska. It's associated with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. It's The Last Cows on Ranching, Wonder, and a Woman's Heart by Catherine Wilder. It's endorsed by Joy Harjo. I'd also compare this book to Braiding Sweetgrass or anything else by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I started reading it already, and she just immediately pulls you in because this woman, Catherine Wilder, is not only a rancher herself, she's from a family of ranchers, so she's really embedded in the history of the West and the Southwest. So if you like stories about the land and ecology and the environment, you'll like this. But also if you like a story about like a can-do kind of inspiring person who's beating the odds, you'd also like this for that reason. I could see patrons who enjoy a novel like Lessons in Chemistry with a strong female protagonist enjoying this as like a good nonfiction read-alike. I will also say, when I went to speak to the Siouxland retired educators, this was the book they were most excited about. So that's The Last Cows, and there are pictures of cows in it. It's a nonfiction selection. Cows will come back into play later. This one is probably my favorite on the list. I've talked to a lot of you about it already. I know Kelsey loves it, has been evangelizing it. I believe she's already recorded her Check It Out for it, is working on it. It's Carolyn Fraser's Murderland, Crime and Bloodlust in the Time of Serial Killers. And you might remember Carolyn Fraser's name. She wrote a really popular biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder a few years back that our patrons really liked. This is such a different book, though, from a biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Ted Bundy's on the cover because it deals with not just him, but quite a few serial killers. And she's telling the story of these serial killers, but she's interweaving it with stories about city planning and the environment and environmental regulations, which sounds like really kind of dry, but oh my gosh, as soon as I started reading this book and realizing the argument she was making, it kind of blew my mind and changed the way I see the world around me. I think that a lot of people in Sioux City who are true crime fans will like this, but even if they're not a traditional true crime fan, maybe they just care about the environment or like civic issues in general, or even as broad as American history, because it really does kind of look at a broad swath of time. I think there's a lot of different people who might like this beyond just the regular true crime heads, but of course it's a true crime book, so we know that we have an audience for that. That goes in the nonfiction pile. Okay, this next one is fun, and I say that because I finished it just recently, and I'm actually working on a Check It Out for it now. It is Helm by Sarah Hall, and she's an author out of the UK, so this book is set in northern England, and Helm is the name of this ancient, powerful wind that always blows over this area of northern England, and so she anthropomorphizes the wind, so the wind is a character, and you kind of get to look down on all the people and the silly humans from the perspectives of the wind, but you also get to see the perspectives of some of those silly humans. So we go to the Neolithic age, like Stonehenge times, medieval era, the Victorian era, the 1970s. There are some characters in today's world here, and they're all trying to interact with Helm in some sort of way, whether they're worshiping the wind or they're trying to control the wind. We kind of see through their stories the ways that the environment and humans have interacted in this area over time. I think people who liked The Overstory by Richard Powers would really like this. It also felt really similar to a Ken Follett book, like The Pillars of the Earth guy, because it is sort of a book that's kind of like the sum of its parts. All these little pieces make up the story, and the entire first third of it, I wasn't quite sure if I was enjoying this book. By the time I got to the halfway point, I couldn't put it down, and I kind of missed these characters. It was a really charming read. So that is Helm by Sarah Hall, and of course the wind spreads seeds, and the wind is always a part of life here in Siouxland, so I think this will tickle a lot of our patrons. Speaking of tickling our patrons, I found this next one to maybe be the most charming book on the list. It's another novel. It's Mia Mackenzie's book, These Heathens. And so it centers around this teenage girl who finds out she's pregnant, and she has this trusted teacher who's taking her to Atlanta in search of an abortion. And it's like, that sets off her odyssey, where she goes through what I would call like a Forrest Gump style story, where she's making little cameos into important moments in history or running into famous people from history. So she meets the kings like MLK and Coretta Scott King are in this book, and there's other events and people pulled from that time period that make appearances. So a historical fiction nut would really like this book. I think historical fiction readers would like it a lot. It's also just so charming. I know, like I just told you what it's about, and that might sound like it could be kind of dark. It's not. This book is just, I think it's a real treat, and it's one that takes perhaps some subject matter that might not be appetizing to every reader and makes it palatable for every reader. So I could recommend this one pretty broadly. It has the feel almost of like watching the musical Hairspray. It's kind of like that vibe is set in that time, which is kind of why the cover looks similar to Hairspray, at least to me. Okay, we've done a lot of the novels. Let's do another nonfiction. This one has been cracking me up, and some of you have gone around reading the chapter titles to you because they are just kind of amazing. Lacey bravely read them out loud on an episode of Reference Roundtable. This is Algo Speak, How Social Media is Transforming the Future of Language by Adam Alexic. And so, let me tell you an example. Okay, chapter 2 is called Sticking Out Your Gyat for the Rizzler. And that gives you kind of an idea of how silly this book is. So it's about linguistics, right? This is for the word nerds, the people who like etymology, crossword puzzles, or really fascinated by the way people speak, or people who can't understand their kids or younger relatives and they're like, what on earth are you saying? This is for them, but it's written in such a fun, entertaining way that even people who aren't really word nerds might be engaged with it. There's also some like, he's talking about algorithms, right? And how to get your voice noticed online on here as well. So I could see some people who use social media for their business being interested in this as well, and kind of looking at a different seed, right? Like what plants the seed of language, what changes the words that we use every day. That is Algo Speak. Let's see. Okay, speaking of like language books, Angel Down by Daniel Kraus. His last book that was pretty big was Whale Fall, if you remember. So the blurb on the front that's covered, it says, "This novel leaves you breathless," and that's from Stephen Graham Jones, who's a horror writer. So you know that means it's pretty intense, and it is. It's set during World War I, and it's this group of soldiers who are tasked with making a rescue mission, and they find out that they're rescuing an angel that was shot down over the battlefield, like a literal angel. So there's a magical realist element to the story, but the thing that really sticks out is the fact it's written in one long sentence. Like the entire book is written in one sentence. There are still chapter breaks and things like that, so it's still broken into pieces, but that's such a unique structure for a book. Some people are gonna hate it. Some people are going to love it. It is a very intense story. I would call it wickedly funny, like a pitch black humor. Maybe not for your typical historical fiction reader, but somebody who likes something like Catch-22 would really enjoy this. I also think, this is a weird connection, but people who might like to listen to their books, I guess I should say, because the audiobook narrator reads it like a drill sergeant. So it feels like you're there and being yelled at by like somebody who outranks you in the military. It's very interesting and once again, kind of polarizing, but it's a fun one. It also mentions Sioux City a few times in here. One of the main characters is from Iowa, so Sioux City pops up and makes cameos throughout, which I know our readers also enjoy. So that is Angel Down by Daniel Kraus, and World War I, a little bit different from World War II, which usually gets all the attention. Speaking of books that get all the attention, Buckeye by Patrick Ryan has already been pretty beloved by our patrons. It's circulated really well. I think we ended up getting 7 copies of it before I even ordered the extra copies for summer reading. It's a Read with Jenna pick. It's by Patrick Ryan. Buckeye is a seed. There's a connection already for you, but it is connected even deeper than that because it's talking about these family and community issues that are passed from generation to generation, the consequences of like a single moment and what that can do through time. So a different way of looking at germination and seeds, if you will. And there is sort of like a magical element. One of the characters is like a seer, so she can allegedly like see from beyond, see things from beyond. So there's still sort of a fantastical element, even though it's really kind of like a slice of life. It's set in mid-century America in Ohio. There's a lot I think our patrons will relate to here. And it's called a small town novel of epic proportions, and I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So I think Buckeye is going to sell itself. The last book I have in here, now, as of today when I'm recording this is so far the biggest hit. This is the one that's checked out the most with patrons already. And you know, I never really know, and it kind of surprised me. I never really know which one's gonna like really scream to people to check it out. But I guess The Jungle, the graphic novel adaptation by Upton Sinclair, and it's adapted by Christina Gearman, so when you're looking it up in the catalog, it's kind of easier to find associated to her name. If you just search The Jungle, it might bring up the original by Upton Sinclair. So it's a graphic novel adaptation of classic American novel. If you've never read The Jungle, totally recommend it, but it's about like the meatpacking industry and the Eastern European immigrants who were moving to Chicago to kind of build up that meatpacking industry at the turn of the last century, so just over 100 years ago. And this book, the original The Jungle, changed the way Americans eat. It's the reason we have the FDA is what it is today. So if you're into foodways, oh, there we go. Let me show you. And like, that's their connection there, and you can kind of see how Let me try to get this right. Okay, look at this. Doesn't that look like one of our local history displays that Sarah Enright puts together? I thought it was so similar to how she lays out her displays, and it looks so similar to our Sioux City history, right? It's Chicago. We're little Chicago. There's a lot that's recognizable here, and of course, meat packing and the meat industry is a huge part of Sioux City culture, so I think maybe those are the reasons this is really speaking to people. A lot of people will remember The Jungle as a pretty graphic story, even without being a graphic novel, but this art, as you just saw, is kind of rendered in a pretty approachable way. It's all black and white, except for these pops of red throughout, which I think is such a brilliant artistic direction for this graphic novel. So it's an American classic novel, but in graphic novel form. We have a lot of patrons who have been curious about reading graphic novels. This might be a good starting point. And it's another graphic novel that kind of shows that, hey, this can be a serious type of book as well. So that is The Jungle, and that's the last book I have on the 2026 Adult Summer Reading List. So we have all kinds of goodies here for our patrons. Down the line, these will turn into book club kits as well, so you'll see them around. But I invite you to check them out for yourself, give them a read. I know a few of you already have. And I hope that as you listened, you could think of a few patrons in mind that you could think of for each of these books. I have some patrons in my head who I could recommend these to, so I encourage you to think of that as well. Or sometimes it even helps me to think of like a celebrity I would recommend a book to, and then patrons who remind me of that celebrity. There you go. This is a little tip for you from a big flower-headed man. That is the 2026 Adult Summer Reading List. If you have any questions, though, of course, you can ask me anything. You can ask me why it's on the list. I love to talk about making this list. It's like such an interesting creative process for me, and I love sharing that with you all. So if you have any questions, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about these books, even when I don't have a giant flower on my head.